You have now been granted access to the Global Entry Podcast. Enjoy your experience.
Brandon Thompson.
What up?
What's up, baby?
What's going on?
Welcome to the Global Entry Podcast, man.
Appreciate it, man. Honor to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. As the great Sean Corey Carter says, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. And you literally could be anywhere in the world because it's a lot going on in the sport, and particularly with you, brother. So I wanted to come spend some time with you and just, let our audience and the culture know who you are a little bit more. And really just kind of dive into everything that's going on in the sport and, just kind of your new position and what it entails as it relates to the progression of NASCAR. They say that luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I feel like I've seen firsthand just kind of your ascension and your progression. But how does a cool-ass brother from Nashville that graduated from Clark University, ascend to the vice president of D&I, diversity and inclusion for NASCAR corporate? How does that happen?
Man, well, first, appreciate you having me again. Appreciate you y'all rocking with me. It's good, and I appreciate the kind words, man. Yeah, it's I agree with that definition of luck. It's where hard work meets preparation. Mm-hmm. It's been a lot. I mean, it's been a long journey. I've been in the sport 17 years. But I will say that it's been constant progress. I've moved around and worked in a few different departments. Worked for a race team once. That's actually how I got here to Charlotte. So thankful, obviously to the organization and to all those that support me like yourself, and a lot of people been rocking with me for a while, man, both inside and out of the sport.
Yes,
so I'm appreciative of that.
Yes, sir. What type of just commitment to who you are? What type of commitment to who you are and who you are does it take to, weather all these storms and things like that?
Honestly, man, it's funny you asked that because it's that commitment and the hope that, time frames like June 1st through June 10th, when all of this stuff sort of happened with NASCAR putting out its statements and, just seeing the progression up to that point is really what's kept me in the sport and really what's kept me inspired to keep going, to your point. So, a lot of people have asked, like, how have you been able to last that long there? And it's like, look, we understand that we've got a long way to go, and we to use a racing term, we are, some laps down and have some catching up to do for sure. But it's not as bad as people think that it is, on the outside looking in. And so this has been a steady progress. This is not something that we didn't, I told somebody else, we didn't just find religion on June 1st, all the way up to June 10th. These things have been in play for a while. And just being public with it is really what just happened in between those dates. And I'm not, I say that not to diminish the fact that, it would have been great if we were there, prior to then. Yeah. But, it was really just a culmination of those things becoming public more than it was us finding religion on those topics.
Yeah. And I try to explain to people too, because I feel like whether you know it or not, you're an extension of me and vice versa. So I always like to, make sure that people understand that the work is being done behind the scenes. And actually, there's a lot of things that you guys have implemented beforehand, but since people just kind of already have this branded in their head and the idea that it's something that's not really going on or progressing. So kudos to you and the whole entire team, because although you had certain responsibilities, you were wearing many hats. It's funny, when all that stuff started to break, was it a feeling of like most black people in corporate America, like, oh, here they want us to come save them again?
Nah, it wasn't really that, man. We had, again, these things have kind of been going on. We've been able to have a lot of good conversations internally. Again, not only about some of the things that have happened in 2020, but even before this, prior to this, we had a lot of good conversations, and being able to get in front of our executives and executives that really were receptive and understand the need for change, the need for inclusion, the need for, and when I say that, not just within the sport and broader society, right? And so it's a lot easier to do and have those conversations when you're talking to people who really do understand, on a different level. So we've had people who grew up in Sanford and whose children, went to school with Trayvon Martin. And so they, those things, when they hit home, it can really change your perspective, regardless of what color, what race you are, right? So, I have been encouraged, like I said before, and continue to be encouraged that, those conversations have been going on, but it was not a like, oh my God, were myself and some other black employees, Latin employees, were we able to lend our voices and lend our opinions? Absolutely. And they were receptive to that, but it wasn't like a swoop in and just get us out of this mess. We're flailing our arms. It wasn't quite that bad.
Sure, totally. You guys do have a kind of an infrastructure in place, although there is work to do. There is a lot of symbolism going on. And, a lot of people were asking that, how are we going to make sure that, or how are you making sure that your position is not something just kind of a weird NASCAR flex, and that it's just symbolic, but it's kind of creating real meaningful change long term? Like, how do you plan on kind of making sure that it's just not a gesture and when I know you personally, and I know you wouldn't be used as a tool like that, but just kind of let the audience know about that.
No, that's a fair question, and I think a question that candidly, they tell you not to read the comments. I read the comments. I like to know what's real, right? And so to answer that question, I would say this: number one, our president Steve Phelps, my former boss Steve O'Donnell, my current boss Jill Gregg, none of those, if I had any plans on just sitting in this position and not doing anything, I can promise you I won't last long. It means something to them personally. It means something not only to that group, but even the France family. Through a lot of conversations throughout this process we've had, this is not just about symbolism. I think the ways that we make sure, I personally make sure that doesn't become the case, is that people have to hold you, your audience, my personal group of friends, my bosses, those other black and LGBT and Latinx coworkers, right, have to hold me and our group accountable for what it is that we're doing. And again, it's not just about me. We got a great team around us as well. But as long as there's accountability in place, we'll make sure that, and we'll get this done. It's not a short process. It's going to be a long process. It's certainly a journey, but it's one that we have, we've decided to stay the course on for sure.
Sure. And so just to clear this up, like, this wasn't something that they ran in your office to quell what was protests going on in Charlotte. Like, this was kind of in the works much prior to the George Floyd incident and all the other incident on the video games and things like that. This was in the works, and a conversation had been had about that particular position, right? Correct?
Absolutely. And so the talk of this position actually goes back probably a year and a half or so, or more. The interview process for this position was taking place really late winter, so up till February time frame. The pandemic and obviously all the other things that have come about sort of halted that process. But no, this is not a new conversation that just happened. Like oh my God, what's going on? We got to get somebody in this position. It wasn't that.
It's still branded.
Exactly. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. But again, I think it's a fair question. And something that, regardless of whether it would have been or would not have been, the authenticity and the realness of what we're trying to do still remains.
Sure. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about, like, you talk about how you've been here 17 years, bro. That's amazing, and especially in our environment, nobody stays with a company no matter what. You could have easily taken this experience that you've had with NASCAR and went to NBA, MLB, MLS, and got a VP position quicker or some director of operations position. Talk about I want to talk a little bit about, you're a humble dude, but I want you to talk a little bit about the patience and grace that it takes to effectuate real change in an organization, to the point that you start off by them not asking you your opinion, and then you'll get to a point where they value your opinion and you see things that you've suggested being implemented. Just talk about kind of that experience and all that type of stuff.
You just dropped the game on listeners, bro, and it's so important that people understand. And I feel like, technically, I think I fall in line of what my age, or what a millennial is. I personally don't identify as a millennial. We're older. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Millennials, but whatever.
Yeah, but by the letter of the law, we fall into that category. But it is something, man, that, that I try to express upon college students when I speak to them, even my own family, about, as they're just starting this professional journey.
Yeah.
You got to gain credibility before your opinion is counted. It doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter what school you went to, it doesn't matter how many great ideas you have. When you come into any organization, you have to build trust. Trust is built by, like I said, gaining credibility and you being a person of executing your job. And so once those things start to happen, people will start to listen to your opinion, right? Then you go from listening to your opinion to people actually implementing part of your opinion, right? And then it goes from, okay, now it's your whole idea, and now it's it's a progression for sure, and it's been that way. And again, I'm appreciative of the management here, and I'm not saying that just to try to put them on. Like it's been the people who I've worked for at this company have really been good about. It doesn't really matter what color you are, how long you've been here, whatever else. If there's something to be fixed, people have encouraged you to jump in, let your opinion be known, say how you feel. Doesn't mean that it's always going to be implemented. They're clear about that.
Yeah.
But it does mean that, we hear you.
And at least you're in the room having the conversation.
Absolutely.
Which is probably more than half the battle.
Yeah, man. It is. And so it's a journey. You got to build that trust and that credibility within an organization before those things start to get implemented, for sure.
What are some of the things that you guys have already started to kind of change this year? I was kind of correcting somebody a little bit earlier. They were like, the flags were flying over the stadium and they changed that. I said, well, technically, the flags, I don't ever remember the Confederate flag is what we're talking about, flying over the stadium per se. But also, I remember when I first started engaging NASCAR, that you guys have banned it from the stadiums. So with that being said, what are some of the specific things that you guys have implemented?
So the flag banning, you're right. We've not allowed those flags to be displayed for some time in a public way. And what we had to clean up with this last announcement was making sure that they weren't allowed anywhere on property. And so that's something that's, again, is going to be, it's out there. We don't have fans back in large numbers right now. Staffs, even at these racetracks where we do have fans, are obviously in limited numbers as well. And so we've got to something that we're going to continue to work on to make sure that we've cleaned that up full tilt and that there's no slip-ups, no incidents. So it's the ban of the Confederate flag. I think internally is where we've got to start. We've got to make sure that, yes, we're certainly concerned with NASCAR as an industry. We're certainly concerned with those partnerships and things like that we're granted. But one thing that we understand at NASCAR is that we've got to make sure that our own house is in order before we start going into the team's houses, the industry's houses, et cetera, to try to clean their stuff up. And so we're really focusing inward right now. That's sort of the lull that people may be feeling, or I don't know that they're feeling that, but maybe they are. Like, hey, well, what's going on? You put out these statements. We've got to shore up our own house.
Sure.
And so we're focusing on employees, focusing on having a lot of those conversations, listening, having our executive team listen and understand where people are right now. And that's gone over very well, to be honest with you. We're just on the brink of launching ERGs for the first time, and so really trying to knock out a couple key quality employee resource groups, absolutely, that we're going to be launching here pretty soon. So a lot of good things in the works internally, but externally as well. And start to see some things in the broadcast and even some of the things that we're doing in our advertising and things like that. All of that is coming. But again, just focusing on shoring up NASCAR as an employer first and foremost, so that our employees, we as employees, feel that we've set an environment and a climate where diversity and inclusion can thrive.
Sure. And a couple of people commented and they said, so can we anticipate Migos and Megan Thee Stallion at Daytona 500? Actually.
Hey, you never know what we might pull out of our bag of tricks. So the Migos have been to a race already. Actually, this year at the Daytona 500, some other guests stole most of the spotlight. Yeah. But Omar Epps and his wife Keisha were both there. I mean, when you talk about this podcast being for the culture, Kima, Keisha, and Pam, that was, as an 80s baby, it doesn't get much better than that for me. Was able to get a picture with them. Winston Duke from Black Panther and a couple other films, obviously, that he's done, Get Out. He was there as well. So we'll bring some guests through. Our LA office does a real good job of finding some key talent to be able to get in. And these people are interested too, man. That's the thing. Like, people are closeted or have always been car fans that just have to get to a race to understand how much they really enjoy racing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially from the community, are kind of sitting on the sideline like, I sent Bubba a couple of memes. You know what I'm saying? That people was like, this is how I'm pulling up to the next race to support Bubba. So they want to make sure that this is an environment that, they can come and enjoy a race and not run into things. And that's why I have been working with you over the years to bring people out to the race, to the races, and just making sure that they understand what the climate and the environment is like. Yep. But you mentioned you being an 80s baby. What was like your first exposure to NASCAR? Because for me, it was super early, and I was actually into NASCAR really early. I had a bunch of the model cars, used to build them. Was it the same for you, or what was it?
Actually, so I remember that probably my first true exposure was probably when I was 4 or 5 years old. Okay. It used to be a department store, at least in Nashville. I think it was all over the South, called Fred's. Okay. And Fred's was like a discount, similar to Big Lots, I guess. But I bought a Richard Petty car that you could push the buttons, and it made all these different sounds. So you had the sound of the sound of the engine, the sound of the pit crew, all these kind of different sounds. That was my first exposure to it. I remember that. The next time I was exposed, honestly, was probably about 6-8 years later, when I was watching the news, the local news in Nashville, and they were talking about Bobby Hamilton, who was a somewhat local driver. They're from the Nashville area, running in the Daytona 500. And that was about it until I got to college and found out about the internship program,
so
the NASCAR
Diversity. The internship
I did, the NASCAR Diversity Internship Program, still around today.
Been around for
a minute. So I was a part of, I think, the second class in 2003. So I kind of dated myself a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So you exposed to NASCAR pretty early. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Who's your top 5 drivers of all time?
I've been trained to be impartial for so long, but I would say, and this is in no particular order, Tim Richmond, because dude was an absolute, he was so different from anything NASCAR had experienced before, an absolute, rock star personality in the sport. Obviously, Wendell Scott, what he meant to as a pioneer, Grease Lightning and all that sort of stuff. But as I've gotten to know the Scott family over the years, it's actually a lot bigger than that. I mean, the things that he endured, the groundwork that he laid for us to be here, having this conversation right now, can't be overstated. Obviously, now he's in the Hall of Fame. Dale Earnhardt Sr., for sure, just because of what he meant as an icon in the sport, the attention and respect that he commanded, and the imprint that he left, even that he has on the sport today. It's all across with licensed products and a lot of other things that he's contributed. Jeff Burton, oddly enough, who's now on NBC, because he was the first driver to ever call me by my first name. Wow. When I first got to NASCAR, one of the things that I did was coordinate the victory lane ceremonies. And I was standing in the victory lane one day after he had won a race, I believe in Dover. And I heard somebody say Brandon. I didn't pay any attention to it because there wasn't no way they was talking to me. And then he said it again, and I was like, well, I didn't even know the dude knew my name. So I always thought that was dope. And man, the last one is I'll probably have to go with Dale Jr. And the reason I say that is because the way that he has taken his platform now, right, and used it for quality change, and the dude is a hip-hop head. So He's good friends with J. Cole. He's got a relationship with Ludacris. A lot of people don't realize that, but he's kind of deep in the hip hop game.
Yeah.
I think he ran like a Left Eye tribute after she passed away.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of reasons
cool,
for Dale Jr. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now you mentioned Wendell Scott in your top 5 drivers of all time. Yeah, top five. So, for those who don't know, he's basically like the Jackie Robinson of the sport. First African-American driver, now Hall of Famer. How does his legacy kind of shape and mold your path forward as you approach like D&I from that lens? Like, how does his legacy shape and mold you?
So one nugget, Elias Bowie was actually the first black driver to compete in the race.
Right.
It's trivia for people. Wendell Scott, to your point though, obviously having won a race and for tenure, right, is largely looked upon as like the first black driver. But to the point of your question, the tenacity, the stick-to-itness, as forever President Barack Obama's coined the phrase. Yeah. That's what it is that's gonna have to push us through, right? Is just the ability see challenges, overcome challenges, and figure out a way to make it work. And I think that's the story of our people, right? Like you figure out ways around obstacles, figure out ways to make stuff happen, and that's really what he did his entire career, whether it was borrowing parts and making them new with his own craftsmanship, obviously enduring the things that he had to endure at that time, in a broader society, no less than the sport.
And a lot of people that are listening to this don't know. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? One, wasn't he from the South, right?
From Danville, Virginia.
Danville, Virginia. What are some of the things that he had to go through? I mean, I'm sure people can imagine, but talk a little bit about it.
I mean, obviously the discrimination that he had to do. So he was, again, something some people may not know. NASCAR was actually started by people running moonshine on back roads in the South, right? And so basically what happened was, as these moonshine runners were looking for people who could outrun the cops, they also the cars had to be able to handle well as they were going through the winding roads. Yeah. So Wendell Scott's legacy is actually right in line with that, in that his name was brought to the forefront as people were asking, and it was like, wait, but he's black? What do you mean? And so that's how he tore up short track racing, man, which is now the Advanced Auto Parts Weekly Series. He won a ton of races on those circuits growing up, or as he was coming through the ranks racing in Virginia. And then obviously he got put into the spotlight onto the Cup circuit. And if it were not for him not be a lack of funding, there's no doubt in my mind he would have been right up there with the top drivers. But broken parts again from not having the resources. A lot of people were good to him. Richard Petty. I think if you look at I don't know this for fact, but if you look at the style of Wendell Scott's numbers, it very closely mirrors those of Richard Petty's, just backwards. So Richard Petty in the famed 43, which Bubba is in now. Wendell Scott's number was 34, and the style of the numbers look very similar. But there are stories of him, Richard Petty, donating car parts and things like that along the way to Wendell Scott to try to help him out. But the things that he was having to refurbish. So if he had an engine that Richard Petty had blown and didn't want anymore, he and his pit crew, which was largely comprised of his family, rebuilt those parts. And they made stuff work with basically nothing, to the point where he was able to win a race. And, that's huge, especially during those times. And so we got to carry that same attitude forward, that there's going to be resistance, there's going to be, pockets of our society that don't want to see change, there's going to be challenges that come across. We got to keep going. That's the bottom line. We got to make it work.
Yeah. And, I think, all of those things that you just mentioned are so important. And part of that, I guess, a lot of people wanted to know, like, what is it like as a black man going through the last, 2.5 months that we've been going through just as a society in America, but particularly in NASCAR. Now, I'm going to park it right there, and I've been telling people pretty much the same thing you go through in corporate America, where you're the only black person in the room. But being that NASCAR is such a unique sport with such a unique fan base, what are some things that you could share with us that it was like just kind of having to go through that experience, during this time that everybody been going through?
Yeah, look, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's pretty much the same. Like NASCAR, good, bad, or indifferent, is really no different than any corporation that anyone works for, right? So we, like many corporations, need to focus on making sure that we are retaining good talent, regardless of color, your sexual orientation, any of those things, religion. So we have to make sure that we're doing that. But I think, again, kudos to our executive team for engaging that segment of our workforce, right? And making sure that we had an opportunity to weigh in, talk about some of our challenges, talk about some of the things that we've endured, talk about opportunities, about things that we could do to address those. I'm really big on don't bring people problems without solutions, right? And so I think those are the things. But yeah, we had a lot of employees share a lot of stories about things that they endure on a weekly basis, from being Black or brown or LGBT or non-Christian, in this environment. And so, and look, and I don't say, and even women, there's like the same challenges that we're looking at now through a more specific lens across all society. And so I think we've endured some of those same things. And with the help of the team and our executive team and the fans, we'll make it through it.
Sure. Okay, now you guys switched up a couple of the not introductions, but the introductions to a few of the races. Was that you?
Again, through broader conversations, man. Just trying to, diversity and inclusion has to hit across every.
Tell the audience kind of what I'm addressing as far as you had the regular national anthem.
You people, I think you probably just schooled a lot of people on that, because I don't think a lot of people caught that. But and I won't even remember what race it was, but Mike Phillips, who was an amazing saxophonist, performed the national anthem virtually, of course, for one of the races not too long ago. And I regret I can't remember which one it was. Either way, in the introduction to said national anthem, the Black national anthem so happened to creep its way in I believe what would be called a medley in the music world, and it called a lot of people's attention, particularly on the NASCAR side. The Black employees at NASCAR definitely caught on to that, and there was a bunch of text messages flying back and forth. But yeah, man, what a time, what a time. The fact that was woven in, that was not, I got to be honest, it wasn't planned. Good on Mike Phillips and his keyboardist for weaving that in. I think it was great. But man, like I said, what a time.
He did it on the fly.
He did.
Good for him.
I was here for it.
Yeah, for sure. So was I. Switching gears a little bit, man. Specifically with you and your proximity to Bubba, and we both and a whole bunch of other people kind of all been the village that have been trying to push him ahead, whether directly or indirectly, and things like that. And we're not even going to address the full controversy of what happened at Talladega. That's BS. But what was it like kind of seeing that brother kind of step into this bridge or position or kind of leader as it relates to that? You know what I'm saying? You and I have talked about so much how NASCAR is one of them sports where you kind of got to have one foot in the culture and one foot in, let's just say corporate, in the culture. You know what I'm saying? One foot in one culture, one foot in another. And so, and with him being mixed race, it already kind of creates a difficult two-step, if you will, to navigate. But what was, I kind of know the response to this, but what was your, just thoughts on just kind of being able to witness that, being that you're in pretty close proximity?
I've known Bubba and his family since he was 16 years old. So watching his maturation and him step into really what I'm gonna be honest, what I feel like is his calling at this point as a leader amongst the garage area. So I'll take a step back. When I mentioned Dale Earnhardt and the impact that he had on the sport, one of the things about Dale Earnhardt as legend and fact go, right, is if Dale Earnhardt was on a racetrack back in those times and he felt the racetrack was unsafe, it was something on the racetrack, it was raining, we as a sanctioning body should or should not have been doing something, it was a good chance that it was going to change based on his feedback because of that credibility. And again, we can kind of bring that whole, but right, he was able to establish that credibility with the France family and management during that time.
Sure.
And so over time, you've seen that baton or that torch be passed from driver to driver. You look at, like I mentioned, Dale Jr. kind of stepping into that role towards the end of his career and now in his retirement. You look at Jeff Gordon stepping into that role, but you look at Jimmy Johnson as he's looking at retirement after this season. Brad Keselowski, I mean, the list goes on, right, in terms of that leadership. Bubba has taken that same leadership. He doesn't quite have the tenure, I think, to put him in the same category as Jimmy Johnson as it relates to, maybe some competition issues and that. He's still working on establishing that comes with time. But when it comes to racial equality, social change, and really having an awakening for this sport, he deserves all of that credit, and he has stepped into that role as much as Jimmy Johnson or anybody else has over the years, right, as far as that particular area is concerned. And that'll continue. The competition part will come as he races more and as he spends more time on the circuit. But watching that, I mean, it was crazy. That's the only word I can really. It's been unbelievable to sit and watch his maturation. Surreal. Exactly, to watch him step into that overnight. And then the other thing I would add to that is that I saw what it did to other young drivers in the D4D program and abroad. Like I saw what it did to Raja Caruth, and on our racing platform through esports, he was able to put together a George Floyd Memorial virtual race. I saw what it meant to other drivers in the D4D program and using their voices to be able to speak out. So I saw what it did for Jimmy Johnson, right, to be able to come out and support Bubba during these times. And again, the list goes on. Todd Dillon, Tyler Reddick, all these other drivers that came forth after Bubba took that stand and stepped up. So hats off to him. I know his family's proud. I'm certainly proud. And the sport, the sport will be proud, and history will smile on him as we move forward.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And I think one thing that's important for people to understand, and it's something that you told me when I first kind of started engaging Bubba, is that he got a black mama. You know what I'm saying? He got a southern black mama.
Yes, sir.
And not no passive. He got a black mama. So for all these people that's making these comments on his Twitter, I'm just letting you know, like, he got a real black mama, and she don't play about her son. So not at all. And I truly believe that cats like Raja and a lot of the people coming through the Drive for Diversity program will be, and Bubba will continue to be the future of the sport and eventually be the face of the sport. We sit here now as the INEX Legend Car Series is going on right in front of us. These kids are 11, 12, 13?
The kids that are in these cars right now are, probably minimum 11, 12 years old.
Sure.
Actually, this class goes all the way up to like 50 plus. But so it's certainly a very young age for these cats to be going around here at these speeds.
How do you guys plan to eliminate that barrier for kids of diverse backgrounds so that they have the resources and the tools to be able to compete in things like this so that they can eventually get to Jesse Awuji's level and Bubba Wallace's level and things like that? Like, what's the plan for that?
Yeah, so two things on that I think are going to be key, and there's certainly more to it. But the first thing is exposure. I think that's the thing that, for me, really stands in the way of anything else. Like, if you're not exposed to it, it doesn't matter if you have the money or not. It doesn't matter if you know where a track is or not. It doesn't matter if you have access to a race car or not. If you don't know about it, then it doesn't exist, right? So I think that's the first thing, is we've got to do a better job of making sure that communities of color, little girls as they're growing up, right, are exposed to these types of things. The second thing is, and you're right, there's an economic gap that we've got to try to figure out a way to curb. And I think one way to do that is through esports, the iRacing platform, NASCAR Heat, those types of video games and those type of platforms, to be able to do that, to expose. So when you think about Raja, It's exactly how he got started, was through iRacing. You know,
and he had an HBCU too.
Exactly. Winston-Salem State,
Yes,
absolutely going to be enrolling there. Already is enrolled. I think starting classes soon. So, but you know, for those who may think like, hey, that's a long shot, man. You go from racing a simulator to actually racing. William Byron, who's a Cup Series driver, which is the top echelon of the sport, got his start on iRacing at a later age than Raja did. So it's possible.
Yeah.
And certainly, you know, with Raja's ascent, he races in this Legend Car series that we were talking about, but he's now moved up to late models and progressing well, you know, running in the top 10 just about every week now. So in just his first year running late models. So yeah, does he have a lot to learn? Absolutely he does, but is he making progress? Absolutely he is. And so more stories like that are things that we have to do, but exposure, esports, iRacing, NASCAR heat, and video games, those are the things that we have to do in order to curb that. And we'll continue to try to find other ways to make sure that we've got some exposure. There's some other things that we're up to that I'm not going to speak on right now, but just hope that they can be unfolded here in the next several months that we're excited about and that are in the planning stages right now.
Sure, and you know, I think that all of those things are really important, and you hit the head on them. If you think about it, there's some similar things going on like in the NHL and things like that they're trying to make sure that they expose kids of color to the sport and closing that particular gap. And a lot of people don't know, like, actually racing in a simulator is kind of a NASCAR racer's hitting the gym to put up shots. You know what I'm saying? So,
exactly what it
you know, that there is some value there for you to be able to transition that into a long stay within NASCAR.
I can't wait till Raja gets up and gets enough prominence to the point where he can say, "You wasn't with me on the simulator."
Exactly, man. And switching gears a little bit, man. We talked about the patience and the grace that it takes to, you know, be here 17 years and watch things come to fruition. But how do you keep up the stamina, bro, to continue to do this? Because it's not just about patience. Like, you know, there also are those meetings where you go suggest something you know should take place for the good of the sport and the community, and it just completely gets misunderstood or shot down. Like, how do you continue to have the stamina, you know what I'm saying, to be able to go do this day in, day out?
Ain't no give up in me. And I think, again, when we talk about the culture, that's ingrained in us. But I think, I guess on a deeper level than that, again, I harken back to knowing the people inside the organization, knowing the majority of the fans, knowing the majority of the people who work on these cars, knowing the majority of the drivers, right? I always felt like this day would come. You know, being able to be sitting here with you in a Coke suite at Charlotte Motor Speedway is really just that all coming together, right? That there is this awakening that's beginning to occur. And I think just having the faith that this day would come is really what kept me going, and what will continue to keep me going. And like I said, man, other than the fact that there ain't no quit. You know, it's like at this point, we done come too far. I just, we got to do it. We got to do it. It's something that has to be done, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we just mentioned that Raja is at a HBCU. You're a graduate of Clark University. Yeah, absolutely. So that's even more, you know, stronger for the culture. But like, how did that experience at Clark shape and mold you to be the, you know, the strong-willed person that you are, in particular for this position, for this point in history right now?
Two mottos at Clark are a culture for service, creating a culture for service, and I'll find a way to make one. So, you know, as I was actually reflecting on that a couple weeks ago, there's no better two mottos, you know, for the school than to translate into what we're doing right now, right? And so, but man, just the camaraderie, obviously, that the HBCU builds, the friendships, you know, that you build, the support from the school has been crazy. And just knowing that you always have a place to call home, you know. Forever I love Atlanta. I spent a lot of time there, even growing up with Tennessee State and fam. Obviously playing in the Atlanta Classic. That's when I decided that I wanted to go to school in Atlanta. And so,
I mean,
but
and you
think
grew up with a juggernaut of an HBCU right down the street, too.
right around the
Tennessee
corner from
State,
my high
yeah.
school, absolutely. So yeah, it's been a part of HBCUs. It's been a part of my life, all my life.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, the first HBCU I went to was Hillman College. So just watching that. So, but yeah, man, I think that just again, it's the relationships for me. It's the camaraderie that you build and the endurance, man. Listen, HBCU teaches you a lot about self, and that's the thing that I feel like people doesn't get enough credit. It really makes you proud on another level of being black, about the legacy of our people, about the endurance of our people, the things that we endured, and the greatness that is. And again, just being in an HBCU in Atlanta, I feel like it's just heightened just with everything, with that sort of being the center of a lot of stuff around civil rights and all of that, right? So, and just being able to look up and know that that's the only 4 or 5, however long it takes.
Sometimes 6, we ain't judging though.
That you're gonna be around your people constantly, it was huge. And so I can't say enough about HBCUs and Clark in particular, man, and I know you can relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Clark is a great institution. And so you were in Atlanta, though, at a cross-section of the sport, you know what I'm saying, when T.I.
Yes, sir.
had that whole partnership with Shabby and was it Dale Jr.?
Dale Jr.
Dale Jr.
Yep.
And they were connecting and doing all that. Like, what? Looking back on that, like, how crazy was that?
Man, when you talk about, and this is probably another podcast for another day, but when you talk about the progression of exactly what it is you're talking about, right? Like when we talked at the top of the podcast about just not being new for NASCAR, like people don't understand. Michael Malden had put together a Welcome to Atlanta event centered around the NASCAR race there at Atlanta Motor Speedway years ago. That sort of faded away for a variety of reasons. Then it came back with T.I., to your point. That went away for reasons that, T.I. kind of get caught up in some legal issues. And then so it was kind of a hard reset again. And so this is probably, I would say, the 4th or 5th sort of hard push. The difference this time, though, and it feels different from being around even at that time, that this one is here to stay for much broader reasons, much more important reasons, just given everything that's going on in society, obviously, right? But certainly looking forward to re-engaging T.I., to re-engaging people like Killer Mike, to re-engaging Ludacris, re-engaging J. Cole, re-engaging any and everybody, who wants to be a part of this, man. But it's going to be some exciting times. But it was an interesting time to watch all of that play out for sure.
Yes, sir. And I think subconsciously that probably kind of downloaded a few things in your mind too about the sport, because it was an exciting time. And so here's where we kind of transition into questions from the culture. So I put out a blurb on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, just saying, hey, I'm going to be interviewing my guy Brandon Thompson. And these are a couple of questions, which some of them you kind of addressed, but these are some
Hi, I'd like to start my video by congratulating Mr. Thompson on his newly appointed role as Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for NASCAR. It's wonderful. Congratulations. I do have a couple of questions that I'm pretty excited to ask you. The first one being, how do you plan on recruiting and sourcing candidates to promote diversity and inclusion without necessarily tokenizing an underrepresented demographic?
Great question, fair question. So I think going back to that HBCU thing, we got to engage those types of groups. I think other groups that we've got to engage, National Association of Black Journalists, National Association of Hispanic Journalists. I know that conference is taking place this week. NSBE. There's a Latinx equivalent whose name escapes me right now, but for NSBE in terms of Latinx engineers. So we've got to truly engage. When I say engage, that means actually latching on, attending those conferences, becoming a part of that culture.
Fabric of the culture.
Absolutely. And then moving forward with those hiring practices, making sure that the teams are aware and understand that there's talent out there. Somebody was telling me just last week on the conference call I was on that Prairie View in Texas is, let me make sure I say this right, they produce more black engineers than any other institution. So got to get a call with Prairie View and figure out how we can engage them. So those are the ways. And then I think, again, man, it really just goes back to exposure. It's making sure that not just on HBCU campuses, but PWI campuses across the country, that people know that there are jobs. And, is while we're sitting here talking, there's more than just racing a car, driving a car, changing tires, being a crew chief that are involved in this. We've got lawyers, we've got nurses, we've got chefs, we've got marketing professionals, we've got anything that you could think of just about in broader, graphic design, we got all of that. And so, when salespeople, again, the list just goes on, but, as we talk about ways to engage, hospitality, exactly right. So as we talk about ways to engage, when people see these posts, they should apply for them, right? And just make sure that we're felt. And that's the other part of it, is that, yes, it's recruitment. We also got to make sure that we're having people submit for for these opportunities, right? So we can start to skew and balance out that pool a little bit.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. I mean, wholeheartedly, that's great. There's another young lady by the name of Stephanie that said, the whole situation with Bubba leading the conversation kind of happened organically, and but what do you feel like NASCAR's role should be in the conversation of race, if at all? And then if you do think that you guys should be involved in that conversation, then how do you guys plan on going about that?
Yeah, I think, look, man, across the sports landscape, everyone's trying to figure out, across the corporate landscape, everybody's trying to figure out what role they play. My personal opinion is that sports has a greater responsibility in that than even broader corporate structures, right? And the reason I say that is because we've seen over time the way sports can influence culture and change across society. And so, personal opinion, yes, NASCAR should absolutely be involved in that, right? Like, we've got to make sure that we're actually laying the groundwork and entrenched in that culture, and then the other stuff will sort of take care of itself. But that takes time.
Sure. This last question from the culture is from Jamil Simmons. He actually is a Clark Atlanta grad. And shout out to Jamil. What sort of, and you talked about this, but I'll give it to you anyway, just so you can sum it up, so that because we talked about a lot of things, but what sort of change can we anticipate down the pipeline from a D&I perspective? What things are you guys going to keep in play? What things are you going to amplify more, and what new innovative things can we anticipate that you can talk about?
Yes. Look, so I think the topics are easy to talk about. So I'll start internally. We got to make sure, again, that we're setting an environment that we as employees of NASCAR feel like we're all appreciated equally, that it's diverse, and that it's inclusive. We've got, look, again, no organization is perfect. We'll be okay there. We're putting some guardrails and some structure around a lot of those things. So but bottom line, to your point, to sum it up, we got to make sure that NASCAR is a great place to work for everybody. I think when you look at the industry at large, we've got to try to figure out, again, how do we use our voice? How do we use our sport, the sport of NASCAR, to be able to influence change, positive change, not only in the sport, but across broader society. I think on track, we've got to continue doing things. Great partnership with Max Siegel and Rev Racing as it relates to putting these people out here to be able to find and curate that talent and get them in the car. When you think about Bubba Wallace, is exactly where he's come from. When you think about what Phil Horton is doing as a part of exactly. FAMU grad, all day. What we're doing with the pit crew, right? And so people don't realize that, yes, the driver, and Bubba gets all the credit that he deserves and that he needs as a driver, but we've got a lot of diverse crew members, again, whether that's Black, Latinx, women, we got them all up and down pit road, so we've got to be able to continue to do that. But then I think the other ways, we've got to look at supplier diversity, not just within NASCAR, but across the industry. We've got to look at the hiring practices, not just in NASCAR, but across the industry. And ultimately, and like I said, weaving ourselves into the fabric of these communities, doing the work, and we understand that we're going to have to do the work, and we're excited about the work to be done, and we'll get that done. And I think once all of those things come into play, and there's several more sort of micro things, but once that happens, I think we will start to reap the rewards of that, right? Making sure that all people from all backgrounds feel like they can come, sit down here at Charlotte Motor Speedway or anywhere else, enjoy a race. It's a hell of a lot of fun. We throw parties same tailgates that you would see at a HBCU homecoming or these classic games. We'll do the same stuff. You got all this space out here that we can do that and provide the same environment. So that will come. But I think those are the things we've got to do to make sure that we're laying the groundwork before all of that happens.
Yep, absolutely. 5-6 years ago when we first met, did you think we'd be sitting in a corporate suite with that title, you know what I'm saying, and just having this conversation? And if you did, that's dope. Talk a little bit about that. But if you didn't, how surreal is it?
Well, I guess I'm in the middle on that one. It's kind of hard to pick. So I don't know that So I've approached my career probably a little bit differently than any of the self-help books or whatever would tell you. Like, I've never really set out and said, okay, I want to go do that. I really just try to bust my ass at every level I've been on and just sort of let the chips fall where they may. Quick plug, it reminds a book that I read. I'm a huge 49ers fan. Bill Walsh wrote a book called The Score Will Take Care of Itself. That's one of the things he kind of talks about. It's like, once you set the culture around you, once you do those things and you put in the work, the wins will come, right? And so, that being said, I don't know that I thought specifically, you know, could I be sitting here? Did I entertain it as a possibility in my head? Sure, I did. Like, dang, you know, what would that be like? But it's still surreal, though. You know, I think that, you know, I couldn't be more appreciative for the opportunity. I think, you know, with the support, again, of people like yourself, my friends group, the employees at NASCAR, the people we got, like, it feels good to be able to, in a small way, represent that and represent the culture here at the sport, and really try to move it forward. You know, just excited to see what we can do, what we can accomplish, and how the landscape of races and entertainment and hospitality and attendance and TV viewership, all those things change as a result of this, you know? And so I'm excited, man. Like I said, just excited about the work that we as a company, as an industry have to do, but excited to really see the fruits of that, man, when we can start having fans back, you know, we can do a podcast again without these masks and all that kind of stuff, man. But once we can start having fans back at the track, that's when we'll really be able to see. And we're gonna throw one hell of a party somewhere. I don't know where, but it's coming.
Man. Last question, you know, and again, this kind of encapsulates all the things that you talked about. Do you know what this means for the culture? What does it mean for the culture?
And about us just not being a monolith, I don't know completely. I think I have an idea, but I don't know that I've completely grasped that. I don't know that all of this, to be honest, has really set in with me yet. You know, I think so focused on doing the work. You know what I mean? That sounds cliche. I almost hate saying that, but like this, like you though, bro. At the end of the day, like you wake up every morning. I will say this: having this job does feel like a certain burden has been lifted. Because to your point, it's like there's duality in our conscious, you know, as citizens of the U.S. every day, right? Like, you know, there's the culture and then there's the culture, right? And so I think in that duality, a certain weight has been lifted off of me because it's like I can solely focus on the things that are always burning or were always burning at the back of my mind. But in terms of actually what it means, I think that'll change over time, number one, but I don't have all the answers. I'm still soaking in, and again, just with the year that is 2020, still trying to figure all that out too. I think once we can get back and we actually start to implement some of these plans, and we can actually start seeing some of the fruits of the labor 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road, then it'll probably start to set in a little bit. But whatever that is, man, we plan on this being for the long haul, right? And so that's why I say it's going to change, because this is not a 2-year, 5-year, 7-year. I'm like LeBron. Let's just keep counting, right? You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to it.
For sure, man. Brandon Thompson, Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for NASCAR. Appreciate you coming on the Global Entry Podcast,
Thanks
man.
for having me.
The entry has been granted. Thank you.